What's going on, everybody? It's Monday, meaning it's time for another NFL mock draft. This, of course, Baltimore Ravens 7-round, no trades mock draft. I used PFF for this one, so let's jump right into it. All right, everybody, if you're new to the channel and you haven't seen these mock draft Mondays before, what I do is I do a 7-round mock draft and I go through all of my picks and talk about the players and kind of give them a baseline scouting report. Some of these players I've drafted before. We've done 8 or 9 of these, I think, at this point. So I've drafted some of these players before, but I will break them down once again. I always love when you guys comment your mock drafts. Let me know your thoughts on my picks. I will mention typically players that I was deciding between, especially in the first round picks, that you guys know where my head was at. And if you want to say like, hey, I think you should have gone with this player instead of the guy you took, just let me know. And I like to see those. I like to see where everybody's lying. Now, in terms of the NFL draft, which is happening next Thursday, I will be able to have my live reaction to that, I believe, but I'm going down for a wedding, which will be that weekend. So I believe I'll be there for the Ravens pick in the first round, unless they trade up to top 10, then I might not be available. But Friday and Saturday, I don't know my availability. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my phone off, and once I get home, I will have somebody text me in one at a time who the Ravens select, and I'll make my reaction to it when I get that text, and kind of give my thoughts so that you guys can still see my process of my reactions to certain players. So the Friday's reactions, the day 2 reactions will probably be posted early Saturday morning, and then the Saturday reactions will probably be posted Sunday morning. So just wanted to let you guys know. Now, if I'm at my computer, if I'm at a TV or somewhere where I can react to it, and the draft is on, I'll definitely do that, but I don't know how available I will be, so it'll be a little bit different this year. I know the last 3 years, I've been really good at, being able to do those instant reactions, but unfortunately I will be at a wedding. My cousin's getting married, so, choosing that over the draft, I guess. But I'll still try and get a lot of content out for you guys. Don't worry. And I'll definitely have videos every day up until the draft. I am making that commitment. That is true. I've got a ton of videos already planned and some already pre-recorded. So now let's jump right into it. Sorry for the long intro. Just wanted to give a heads up in case people were wondering when the draft comes. But round 1, pick 30. I rarely go wide receiver in the first round in these mock drafts, but I just figured my belief is take the best player available, and the best player that was available, I'll talk about all the positions. Tackle was Jordan Morgan. He was available. Kingsley Sumatia was available. Kieran Amagagie was also available. He's not really a first-round tackle, though. Edge rushers, Chop Robinson was available. Darius Robinson was available. I prefer Darius over Chop, but I don't love either of them as first-round picks. I know I took Darius Robinson last time, but a lot of these mock drafts is more me feeling out how the Ravens can approach the draft. What happens if we go wide receiver first? What happens if we go edge first or tackle first? How do you maneuver the rest of the board? And then corners, there really wasn't any corners. No first-round corners in my opinion. All the first-round guys were gone, so I was like, all right, it's not really worth it there. So wide receivers. Wide receivers that were available, A.D. Mitchell was available, and basically anybody ranked after A.D. Mitchell was available. I don't think I saw Xavier Legette, though. He might have gone a little bit earlier. But I went with Keon Coleman. And if you guys know me, Keon Coleman is my guy in this draft. I think he is vastly underrated. I think people will point to his combine and say, look, he had a bad combine. And I would strongly disagree with that take. I think he had a great combine. He didn't have a good 40. His 40-yard dash time was slow. But remember, he's a 6'4" guy that's not known for blazing quickness. Okay, he has top-end speed, which is very good. He's very good top-end speed, which was proven when he was running the gauntlet and running wide receiver routes for the quarterbacks to throw to. He was averaging some of the highest speed when running those routes in comparison to guys that ran much faster 40-yard dash times. He plays fast. He's quick. He's quick getting to the ball. Sorry, he's not quick off the line, but he's quick getting to the ball. He has great hands, very, very long reach. You know, you can throw it up anywhere and he will be able to catch it. And I think Florida State used him improperly. What Keon Coleman's really good at, obviously jump ball situations, but he's good underneath. Great in the screen game. He's a yak guy, which you don't really see out of 6'4" guys. And what he has is significant. Now, people may hear like, oh, 6'4" rack guy. We heard that with Quentin Johnston. Keon Coleman is a much more polished player than Quentin Johnston was coming out of college. And he has much better hands. And he's really quite strong. And he's the difference between him and Quentin Johnston, I will say, is Keon Coleman is a dog. Like, that's like the best way to describe it. Like, Keon Coleman will seek contact. He will lower the shoulder. He will block you. He will be physical. He will fight with you. We never really saw that out of Quentin Johnston. He seemed kind of scared when he was playing in those big games. But in big games, Keon Coleman was going at SEC and ACC defensive backs, and he was playing very, very well. And he was the primary option in that offense. I know they had Johnny Wilson, 6'6", but Keon Coleman is a great athlete with unbelievable size and hands, and the Ravens can absolutely use that for their offense. So I think he is my perfect wide receiver for the Ravens to draft. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. or Rome Odunze was available. Yeah, I'd take that. But other than those two, there's nobody I'm taking over Keon Coleman. And yes, I left out Malik Neighbors. I know that's a very controversial take, but I like Keon Coleman more. Next up, round 2, pick 62, I went with Kyrie Jackson. Most of these analysis will not be as long as the Keon Coleman one, but I figured there would be a lot of comments about that because a lot of people don't like Keon Coleman. So I wanted to get my take on that. But Kyrie Jackson, cornerback out of Oregon, another really big player. I think he was listed in college at 6'3", but at the combine he measured in at 6'4". Physical, man-to-man corner. Good top-end speed, not crazy quick and agile, but he has the traits that you want to see in a young corner that is going to have to develop because, remember, we have Marlon, we have Brandon Stevens, we have corners that we can play. Like, we're not drafting Kyrie Jackson to be our starter this year. The question is, are we going to re-sign Brandon Stevens? He's probably going to demand a lot of money. Can we develop Kyrie Jackson underneath our guys to learn, and be a good press man corner with his size and his aggressiveness? He is extremely aggressive in the tackling game, which I love in a cornerback, especially a young cornerback, because that's typically not something you can teach, right? That kind of reminds me of Marlon Humphrey, someone who's a very willing tackler. And Kyrie Jackson, he's a very good tackler, even though he's not crazy strong or anything like that, but he wraps up really well. He's very aggressive. He breaks on the football when it's thrown, and he gets his hands up. He gets his head turned so he can try and swat the ball, or he can try and get an interception. He has those traits. He needs to work on his anticipation a little bit, but what I saw out of him I really liked. He's also from Maryland, which I did not know until I drafted him, so kind of cool for him going to Baltimore to play professional football. But I feel like drafting corner is definitely something I want to do in this draft, just to prepare for the future. And I think the Ravens do a good job, especially early when it comes to drafting corner. You look at Brandon Stevens, was drafted way earlier than people thought. We did a great job drafting Marlon. We can struggle like round 5. Like day 3 corners are very hard to hit on, but I think the Ravens are pretty darn good at round 1 and day 1 and day 2. So I went with him. Next up, round 3, pick 93. I went with Dominic Pooney out of Kansas, listed as a tackle, thought of more of as a guard. But again, he has experience playing tackle and playing guard. He'll be able to compete at both spots. I think he would probably have a good shot at winning the guard spot. And unfortunately, like I said it before, I'll say it again, you're going to be missing a position after the first 3 rounds in this draft, right? I think there's 4 or 5 positions that the Ravens need in this draft and could use players right now in this draft. Wide receiver, tackle, guard, edge, and corner. That's 5 positions, right? We only have 3 picks. We're going to be missing something. Right now, we're missing tackle and we're missing edge. And we're not going to be able to get anybody that's going to be able to start right away. But now it comes down to finding players that you can potentially develop and looking for players that, would be more difficult to find in free agency. And I think the easiest position to find in free agency for veteran players is edge. It's very difficult to find offensive linemen. So my strategy was draft developmental offensive linemen, see if we can get them up so that next year or the year after they may be able to play, because I didn't draft one in the first 3 rounds or the first 2 days. But round 4, pick 113. This guy I think is just too good to pass up in this spot. I went with Tyke Smith. I really like his game. A box safety that can play over top and play underneath. He can, you can send him after the quarterback. You can cover him with cover a tight end. You can put him in the slot. He played everywhere at Georgia. Georgia's been an NFL factory for a couple of years. And, with the Ravens losing Geno Stone, that third safety. I talked about this in the last mock draft, I think. Using Tyke Smith as that third safety, all of a sudden now you have 3 safeties that can play any spot in the defensive backfield, right? So Kyle Hamilton over top, Tyke Smith over top, Marcus Williams over top. You can put any of them in the slot. You can put any of them in the box. All of them can play everywhere. And then if you need a specific slot corner, we have our Darius Washington. You can throw him in. But Tyke Smith brings a lot of versatility, and we wouldn't be forced to. I think with Geno Stone, the issue was if he's on the field, he has to be single high. And that means Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams are playing underneath, or one of them has to play underneath. And I like Kyle Hamilton playing over top as well. And so it kind of just restricted the defense when you put one of those backups in to go into a nickel or dime set. Now with Tyke Smith, I don't think you're going to be hindered as much. And you can use him in certain ways and, pair him with Trenton Simpson and Roquan Smith and get that physicality and speed on the defensive side of the ball. So I really do like his game. Next pick, round 4, pick 130. I went with Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. Now, Braylon Allen is a top 5 running back in this class for me. He's probably number 3. I absolutely love his game. The reason why I haven't drafted him recently was I was taking Will Shipley in this spot more because we had questions at kick returner and punt returner. But guess what? The Ravens signed Deontay Hardy. So it's unlikely that we will need a return specialist. Now, if a player that we draft ends up being a really good returner and he wins the job, that's great. But I'm not looking specifically for a return specialist now, and I'm able to just focus on, hey, who do I think is the better back? And I go with Braylon Allen. His biggest concern is he has fumbled the ball a fair amount, but the positives with him are just endless. His size he's huge. Now, he looks small compared to Derrick Henry, but he knows Derrick Henry. He's friends with Derrick Henry. He's worked out with Derrick Henry. He's compared to kind of a mini Derrick Henry. He's got very, very little wear on his legs, especially for a Big Ten running back, because he essentially told the coaches, hey, I'm not going to be your, 400 carries a season running back. I don't want to ruin my chance in the NFL. He's like, I want to split carries because I don't want to, burn out my legs. Like I've seen so many Wisconsin running backs do, right? You see Jonathan Taylor coming out of school and it's like, dude, this guy's been toting the rock. Melvin Gordon, and they get to the NFL and they're good. They're really good. But then they get hurt because they have so much wear on their legs. And I'm not saying Jonathan Taylor's a bad player. I think Jonathan Taylor's fantastic. But he carried the ball a lot at Wisconsin. Braylon Allen carried it a lot less, but was very dominant, very difficult to tackle. And then finally, he's super young. He'd be one of the youngest. He'd be one of the youngest players in the NFL his rookie year. He's incredibly young. He may be 20 when he gets drafted, I think. But I mean, finding a running back that young is rare. Typically, you're getting guys and they're 21, 22 years old. And again, that's just more wear on their legs. So I really like Braylon Allen as a backup for Derrick Henry as a bruiser. And then we obviously have Justice Hill, catch the ball in the backfield. He can pass block and everything. And then when we get Keaton Mitchell back, he's our speed guy. He's our explosive play guy. But Braylon Allen and Derrick Henry is a 1-2 punch no team in the history of the NFL would ever want to face. Next picks, I'll say round 5 and round 6, back to back. I went with Jalen Sundle out of North Dakota State and Aneem Donkwa out of Howard. Both tackles, both very big. I think Jalen Sundle is 6'5". I know Aneem Donkwa is 6'8". both out of smaller schools. And I brought it up earlier. You know, we're not going to be able to get a guy that can start right away. So why not find players we can try and develop so that they can start next year or in a couple of years? These were those two players. Both players that I think could develop well at the tackle spot. They have the size. And that's something that, you know, most offensive line play and development is not talent. Really isn't. It's completely about offensive line coaching. Because you look at some of the offensive linemen coming out of college and you're like, how did this guy fail? And it's like, well, he was put into either a poor system or they didn't develop him right. The Ravens have been okay at developing offensive linemen, especially offensive tackles. So, you know, getting two guys to be backup offensive linemen for this year or maybe a couple of years underneath Ronnie and underneath Daniel Falele, and maybe Patrick McCarry wins the starting job. Developing under all of those guys, they're going to learn a lot. And, you know, maybe they're going to be able to start. But again, these are round 5 and round 6 picks. You're taking a shot with any position that you take. And I felt like tackle was so important. I wanted to get 2 of them just to make sure we have a better chance of hitting on one. And the Ravens do pretty good when they take 2 players at one position in the draft, especially recently, right? You look at the tight ends they've drafted when they draft 2. You look at, really, it's just the tight ends. They've done really good when they draft 2 tight ends. They don't draft the same position outside of like skill positions very often. But it's typically like their skill positions is usually like, I think they did a really good job with Devin Duvernay and James Prochet. Like they drafted them late. Devin Duvernay became an all-pro returner and James Prochet was a solid depth guy. Like you're not drafting these guys to become all pros every year, right? You're drafting them to become capable starters or capable players that can help contribute to your team. And when the Ravens draft 2 guys, they typically find at least one of them can contribute. Next up, I went with Jordan McGee, round 7 pick 228 out of Temple. I draft this guy all the time. I think his value is too good. You know, we lost Patrick Queen. We need depth. Jordan McGee brings depth and he brings versatility, right? He can rush the passer a little bit. He's good in pass coverage. He's okay against the run. He's got NFL size and athleticism. You know, he kind of brings the whole package. So the only reason he's not higher on draft boards is because he went to Temple, right? So, you know, he's not, you know, coming out of the SEC. He's not coming out of the Big Ten. He's coming out of a smaller program. But I think he can really play, and especially as a backup, he'd probably contribute on special teams early in his career. Could be decent. Then final pick, round 7, pick 250. I went with defensive lineman out of the University of Alabama, Tim Smith. In Aussie, we trust. Whenever there's an Alabama player, especially in a spot where we don't know exactly who we want, might as well take the Alabama player. And defensive line is definitely a position group that we could use. And I think that getting a guy out of Alabama is never going to be a bad thing. I didn't really love any of the players that were available. I wasn't finding any good pass rushers that I like. I wasn't finding any, sleeper wide receivers. So I figure defensive line, the Ravens did a very good job at developing, especially late round pick defensive linemen recently. So I think him slotting in and trying to earn a spot, or even if he's practice squad for, a year or two, and we eventually get him in, kind of fill in that Broderick Washington role if he ends up leaving eventually, but kind of just slot him in behind everyone and say like, hey, if you can develop, like, you're going to play, because the Ravens use defensive linemen and they like defensive linemen a lot. But that's the draft. I'll run through it one more time. Keon Coleman, Kyrie Jackson, Dominic Pooney, Tyke Smith, Braylon Allen, Jalen Sundell, Aneem Donkwa, Jordan McGee, and Tim Smith. Let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on the mock draft. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see all of you again tomorrow.